Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining from today. Thank you for joining our weekly live stream. Today's topic is managing resistance to change in an AI-driven world, and I'm excited to introduce our guest here in just a moment. But before I do that, just a couple logistical things. First of all, if you have questions along the way, please drop them in the chat. We'd love to hear any questions you have, so please just drop those in the chat. We're keeping an eye on that during the stream. And we'll get to those questions here. And speaking of dropping questions or comments in the chat, if you don't mind also just dropping in the chat where you're joining from today. What city and country are you joining from? We always like to get a sense of where in the world everyone is joining. So I'd love to hear from you and where you're joining from today. So if you don't mind just dropping in the chat what city and country you're in, love to hear from you. And lastly, before I introduce our guest, this live podcast interview becomes part of our weekly Transformation Ground Control podcast, which you can find every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And it's a podcast about all things related to digital transformation, including digital strategy and software evaluation, implementation planning, implementation project management, as well as today's topic, which is change management. So those are just some of the things you can expect in that podcast. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. I'm the host of that podcast. And Third Stage Consulting is an independent and technology agnostic consulting provider that helps clients with their digital transformation journey. So thank you all for being here today, and thank you to our guest, Izabela Lundberg, who's here today to help us chat about managing resistance to change in an AI-driven world. So with all that being said, Izabela, thank you for being here today.
Good morning, Eric, and it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, glad to have you. First time on the podcast. I've been on your podcast. We've met before. We've had conversations about this stuff in the past, but it's great to have you here for the first time on this podcast. But before I jump in and just start asking all this stuff I want to ask you about change management, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, if you don't mind.
Sure. We kind of share a passion for obviously not only just change management, but leadership, and being a founder and CEO of Legacy Leader Institute in Matrix Advisory Group. We've been focusing, working heavily with C-suite executives. And as you know, it's never enough of great strategy, but also great execution and implementation needed in times that we're focusing on right now, which is also disrupting things through either fast-growing startups or Fortune 500 companies, where we really contribute to inspire not only fantastic champion cultures, but also really help organizations to thrive and also be able to really navigate the disruption that we're seeing here in the AI.
Right. Yes, I want to get into that. There's a lot I want to cover there as it relates to that intersection between people, resistance to change, and also AI too, and just emerging technologies too. But before we get to that, though, I guess if we sort of just start at a high level, and based on your experience with helping organizations through change, why in general do employees resist change related to new technologies? If we're all excited about it and we love all the possibilities of technologies, then why do we as employees and why do employee teams tend to resist change?
That is an excellent question. And Eric, as we know, human nature and human dynamics are a really huge factor in that. So we look at things from multiple different perspectives. How is this impacting me individually? And then how is it impacting me professionally, right? Always comes that factor of the fear unknown. Is this going to be something that's going to impact me in reversely, or how is this going to what level of discomfort is going to be created? How can I adjust and change with the environment that is happening? But right now with AI, obviously we're seeing something that did not happen in quite some time. Speed to change, expectations to change that really are affecting people. From one standpoint, I'm seeing for like obsolescence. Am I going to be obsolete pretty soon? Is the AI going to take over, right? It's always better to have a status quo, right? Because at least I know what's going to happen. Then we have something that often happens, and I'm sure you experienced this tremendously as well. It's lack of understanding where we're going, what we're trying to do, who is making decisions, how is this going to be impacting in the long versus short run. But then absolutely lack of understanding. If we don't have a shared understanding, it's going to always backfire, right? And one thing that I'm seeing consistently, unfortunately, lack of adequate training. If we're not having opportunity to train people, what's going to happen? We know it's going to constantly perpetuate that resistance and build up more and more. And as a result, we see some evidence of that with so many organizations.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. Is that the unknown, the fear of the unknown is what tends to cause people to panic or fear or resist change. And when you think about AI and the threat that it poses an opportunity, but it also poses a threat. And I think that's what we have to recognize when we're deploying new technologies in organizations is it is a threat. Even if people recognize that it's a good thing for the business overall, it's still it's that uncertainty that can create the challenges for sure. So I
Yes.
wanted to turn to the audience here just real quickly. Thank you for those that have dropped in the chat where you're joining from, just to give you a sense of where people are joining from in the world today. Meherban from Toronto, thank you for being here today. Dave from Toronto on YouTube, thank you for being here. Alcinda from Johannesburg on LinkedIn, thank you for being here. Banu from India, thank you for being here. And then SAP BW Guru says, always great to hear from Eric. So thank you for that feedback there. And if you have any questions for us, please be sure to drop those in the chat. And I'd love to hear from the audience too while we're talking here. And as I get into my next question, my question to the audience is, what do you think the biggest root cause of resistance to change is? I'd love to hear just your feedback and what you've seen throughout your careers, and maybe you're experiencing some of that resistance to change right now in your organizations. And I'd love to hear from you on your feedback there. Um, so Izabela, getting back to this thread of change resistance and that fear of the unknown and the things that can cause resistance to change, do you find that resistance is more common in certain levels of the organization? Like if we're dealing with mid-level management or frontline employees, senior level management, are there certain types of people or groups of people that you see resist change more or less than others?
Another excellent question, and it's actually really good to kind of look at from multiple different perspectives there, right? What's happening with mid management, for example, versus frontline employees and how they're being impacted, but also from senior executive perspective. And we see, obviously, that is scales are tipping from multiple different perspectives because the load of responsibility is also shifting dramatically, right? And the middle management is the one that typically is in charge and executing on a lot of heavy duty and does very heavy lifting, right? So as a result, resistance to change does manifest differently depending how his organization structured, but also with organizational different levels. What I found for specific mid-level management and their resistance is because of technology is disrupting their day-to-day operations, the control systems, because sometimes things are happening at once and multiple different approaches, and requires a lot of times to really think about around decision making and processes, a level of obviously how it impact on their people. Conversely, we're also seeing a lot of things that are happening in frontline because resistance is there due to concerns that they're having related to job security. And right now we're seeing so much shift that is happening. We have a magnitude of jobs, for example, being posted, while in the same time organizations are not hiring, yet they're having tremendous layoffs. And we can also look at why we're doing what we're doing and how we're making decisions. As a result, obviously, they're going to impact not only their performance, and middle management is definitely now scratching their head, what is happening with stuff, as well as also with disruptive avenues that are seen day to day. So looking from that perspective, I also have to say, Eric, we have seen a lot of stuff happening also with senior executives, because as you know, C-suite is being tremendously impacted as well, because they typically are maybe excited to get a new technology in organization, to be able to say that they are also going in the right direction to reach specific goals and outcomes. But if it does not happen support from top leadership within an organization, things not going to fly as easy and as effectively as they could, right? So I think it's really important when we look at cohesively to find levels where the impact it is the most. And I can have to say, always comes to talent. Talent, it's being impacted severely and continues more than ever right now.
Yeah. Yeah, you bring us a bunch of great points in that response. I mean, beginning with that senior level, senior management support, without that, it's going to be really hard to get people's buy-in and get people to overcome that resistance to change if the executive leadership isn't setting that tone at the top. Here's a question that's sort of related to what you just said, Isabel. It's sort of a good segue into this question from Jan on YouTube. Jan says, "What would diverse skill sectors and having young at the top lead to clearer communication and more action. So are there, maybe just to reframe it a little bit, are there different types of demographics or skill sets or traits of effective leadership that can lead to better communication and better alignment and better action from employees?
Absolutely. We have opportunity, obviously, to look at and find avenues. How do we actually culturally engage with each other, regardless of the status or position and title, right? So that functionally and incrementally, because we still see, specifically as a larger organization, it gets still a lot of fragmentation and silos and competing agendas and priorities, as well as rollouts, right? How is the change being rolled out? Who are the truly champions and pioneers and early adopters, and obviously understanding generation. Also, we see a lot of younger generation being much more eager to adopt new technologies, while we still see other generations lagging or not necessarily as having as much passion and interest yet another technological change. So when you see that happening, of course, communications, inclusion, and understanding of that vision and direction and the value of it, it's essential.
Mm, yeah, it's great points. And what about given the topic here today, it was going to be hard not to get into AI and just jump right into it, but we're getting a bunch of questions already about AI, so maybe we'll sort of jump into the eye of the storm as it relates to AI, if you will. So this is from SAP BW Guru on YouTube. They say, coming from SAP skill set background, how can we evolve in terms of AI driven world? What skill set is required to move in the right direction towards, we'll just call it technology in general, including AI? What's kind of skill sets can we expect to have, or should we be thinking about, that might be different now than what we might have needed in a pre-AI world?
What I'm finding consistently that is pattern, and I know this sounds so basic and simple, but everything comes with a phenomenal leadership skill sets, right? Because those, even with AI existence, AI should be leveraged and utilized as a tool. If we have a tool that has tremendous power, but we don't have individual capacity to not only lead ourselves, but lead others, and focus on to really develop us more individually as great leaders, be able to have, as we come back all the time to those soft skills, which in my mind are the most essential skills, which is critical thinking, able to juggle multiple different priorities, and at the same time be able to also absorb and understand capacity of people and their availability, as well as what the tool can also produce. With speed of change, obviously, and transformation that is happening, occurring simultaneously on individual level, organizational level, we obviously have more than ever need to adopt to not only how to use the tools effectively, but also how to leverage them. That we really take in consideration ethics right now, because of lack of regulations. I'm seeing so many things that are falling as default, or are just like, oh, we will just do it our way or ask for a permission later. We're seeing so many issues as well. So it's also a great opportunity to really show up and lead in a way where we can really show not only what's possible and how to leverage in the best light, but also how it's possible to transform and do something better with it. And as a result, create ecosystem internally first within organization, as well with our clients who are really eager to receive quicker, better, more effective service or our support.
Mm, yeah, that's super interesting. And you're sort of alluding to how we can, develop those skills and use AI to define a future state of what we're going to be when we grow up as an organization. And this sort of leads into a question here from Meherban on LinkedIn. Meherban says, for AI implementations, does our approach to documenting future state processes for ERP change? As AI is increasingly incorporated into ERP systems, I'm wondering if it necessitates adjustments to our process mapping methods. So what have you seen along these lines as organizations try to figure out what that future state is going to be and how we're actually going to use AI and to create that clarity that you're that you were talking about that you need to have for an organization not to resist change?
I love how you tie that, because right, every time we have a new technology, it doesn't matter what technology, but now when we talk about specifically the AI, we affect three elements there, right? We affect process and people, and technology itself, right? So understanding what's in there for me, and then again understanding how is AI going to help, how is going to affect the role, is it going to make things easier for me, or is it going to also completely make me obsolete, as like, am I going to be needed? That is one of the biggest concerns actually that I'm finding right now, that a lot of people are panicking what roles are going to be eliminated as a result, because we're seeing so many different statistics and data and anticipation what future holds. When it comes to the process itself, obviously has a tremendous avenue to not only help with the process implementation and helps to speed things up, but the reality is how humans observe and learn. Can they really go as fast as AI able to dictate? And that is truly important. Again, leadership call to step back and really make sure that speed of acceleration and processes are thought through, and also that people that can truly absorb and go with that change can go along side by side.
Yeah, it's a great point. And as we talk about executives in organizations and in that leadership component of managing change and overcoming resistance, this is from Alcinda on LinkedIn, and Alcinda says, from an executive point of view, whose responsibility or mandate would you say is change management? Do you foresee a chief change officer position coming up in the future, given the importance of this activity as part of digital transformation? Super interesting idea and question. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Brilliant question, Linda. I love it. And actually, I hope it does come to that level, because what I'm seeing is right now, one of the biggest issues that we experienced with previous economical downturns, every time when we have fear, where we're not sure, and when it's a lot of uncertainty, what companies typically do, hoard the money. They actually do layoffs. They try to contract and shrink and wait. And what that does, obviously, is doesn't help, right? Because right now we're seeing something really interesting, explosion of AI and speeding up and need to continue to learn to grow. But in the same time, the growth that is expected, that is affecting bottom line, it's not there yet. And as a result, what we see is trimming the most important asset to every organization, which is talent. So a lot of organizations are rolling changes without even considering and taking in consideration change management. As a result, it's backfiring on so many ways. People are not, first of all, they're very much so fatigued right now. But in the same time, they're not as eager, even with the big dangling carrot, what this AI can really do for you, because they're really seeing that they're not being included in dialogue and process and conversation. And sad part is, I can tell you how many organizations I'm being through in conversations in the last 4 years, just since disruption with COVID, post-COVID, and today, that still do not effectively leverage or utilize that, and as a result are seeing symptomatic issues. And the ones that actually do are the ones that are thriving, growing, and accelerating their growth, and then consistently are keeping and having that sense of stability and sustainability. So I just want to say that I really hope that gets the point of the be independent role. And I also hope that C-suite executives starts really looking deeper, understanding the cause and effects, and they're willing to spend and invest which truly matters the most. Because who cares if you have a great technology, and if it's not utilized, it's not adopted, and you never see ROI, KPI with that technology in your organization.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting point, interesting question, interesting response, because it kind of reminds me of maybe 20 years ago. Remember when a lot of CIOs reported to the CFO? You sort of had they created the CIO position, but it was still kind of buried in the org chart. A lot of times you'd have it report to the CFO, and I feel like it was just in the last maybe 20 years where it started to shift, where now CIOs report straight to the CEO. In many cases, they're part of the board, they're part of the executive team, and it makes me wonder: is that forthcoming for the change management role? Will that eventually have that level of attention and that level of commitment from organizations to create that sort of a senior executive role for the change management discipline, which would be a huge win for the discipline, if you ask me.
Absolutely. And it's very interesting you asking that, because we also seen as huge, tremendous change also on the technology side. So C-suites, and specific with CTO, now we have CISO, and just in general, but you have two different bodies that are actually managing one particular area, right? So what's going on also there in terms of disruption? And as you know, a lot of digital transformation happen on that side first. So it's like, how is that translating with CFO, with CEO, and CIO, and actually with sales and marketing? And one interesting thing is that I'm constantly watching, and I find it fascinating how much teams, the top guns that are top sales executives, are still so sluggish on accepting the shift, the change, and changing the approach. How do they actually sell? And the fact that we see huge discrepancy there as well, meaning if you have now tools and opportunities and you're not adjusting as fast in positioning, organizations not going to be able to turn the ships as fast as they would like to. Pouring more money is not going to also solve the problem as long they're not willing to make a fundamental change and approach how they're talking about what they're selling, specifically related to AI products and services related that directly are being impacted, which also shows that, again, human nature, where the adoption needed to happen the fastest, quickest way, it's even there lagging significantly.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. I want to come back to a point that from early in the conversation, Eduardo on LinkedIn made this comment here about why people resist change, and this is sort of in response to my question of why do you think the biggest sources of change resistance, where is that coming from? And Eduardo says people won't perform as expected either because they don't know why, they don't know how to perform, or simply because they can't. So it's interesting. So it's the why, the how, and the can they do it. Address those answers in advance, and people will embrace change. And I think that's a great point.
Absolutely. And then the last one, specifically training, like how do you foster the training? How do you foster learning opportunity? Do you have a culture of a learning to begin with? I'm dealing with, when we're dealing with a lot of people that are being doing things for 10, 15, 20 years, they're so inflexible. And, because in the past, certain things work very well. And then they're wondering why they're not working as right now, and why they're losing the footing. So always starts with that aspect as well. Obviously, when it trickles down, but if you don't have the tools, you don't have a proper education, and you don't have a proper training, things are not going to go as fast as they could be, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And here's a question that I think is really interesting. I don't see who it's, so I do see who it's from. It is from Sid on LinkedIn. And this is a really interesting question. I like this because it's sort of bringing together not just change management and AI, but now a third dimension, which is data. And I think
Yes.
there's a nice parallel or a nice connection here, intersection with what we're talking about. And what Sid says is within many corporate environments, data is defragmented and in silos. In many instances, the BI team performs data transformation and makes the reports work. If the foundation of data is not addressed and continually governed, many AI initiatives will likely fail to complete that one. So he's talking about how there's a need to maybe get to the root cause of why we have bad data, because we have to have good data in order for AI to work. And in the past, we could always sort of gloss over it by just, creating some reports or cleaning up the data to create the BI or the reports we need, but that doesn't quite work. It doesn't work in AI. You need clean data. You need a lot of data. So how do you see organizations sort of changing their culture, their mindset, their processes, their roles and responsibilities to address this whole need for data hygiene, or whatever you want to call it?
I love that question, and I love it. Kind of ties also for previous comment. But where I want to go with this for a second, again, I know that you guys are probably sick and tired hearing this. Whatever leadership accepts and tolerates, it's going to continue. So if they've been called tolerating or accepting types of reporting or level of the DR, right? Unless they're willing to make a shift and change. And I think, again, it's so important to really understand the root causes, right? So when poor data hygiene exists and persists, and obviously calls for change in not only processes around, but also how a team that is responsible for it is really gathering and initiating that. What obstacles are there? And we know that are tremendous obstacles there. And if leader is not there to help to remove those obstacles and also help to yield the right direction where things are going, it's going to always there be issue. We see no matter what we're applying, we see these problems circling around. Now, whatever we, as we used to call it, sweep under the rug, it's going to be glaring obvious. And that's why we're seeing such a huge shift. You see suite, a lot of people are exiting or asked to exit because of dysfunctionality. Right now, we have a more than ever tools that can really pinpoint and show us, oh, we didn't measure these things correctly, or we didn't align this correctly. So it's more and more questions, right? And when we have more and more questions, we're seeking to find more answers. Sadly, we see also a lot of blame, but it is also a great opportunity, again, with the right type of leadership and mindset to shift that around. Because again, those tools and processes, when they're in place for right purpose and reasons, they're going to work effectively. Until that happens, we're going to always stumble. So I've been in situations, I'm going to use this quick example, where if we're not looking the root cause, we're going to make poor decisions strategically. And this is exactly what happened when we were looking specifically exit from previous year. And right now, the course that we're taking on, for example, it's having tremendous implication as a result of ineffective data. So again, back to that was who is responsible? Who is the responsible at the end of the day to present proper reporting? And how far we're willing to go, right? And it's the same thing as a pain point. When do we change? When pain point gets severely high, right? That's when human nature, that very rarely we change proactively, progressively, right? Voluntarily, right? Very few people are the ones on that small percentage that will do that. So I really hope that some organizations will not wait to that paying that exponentially higher, because it's obviously just looking at people and their tendencies and their behavior already showing where the thresholds are. So to, again, circle back with this, Eric, with that particular question, again, unless leaders are stepping up and really understanding what their responsibility is, I think then we're going to have a lot more of those issues coming along in months and years to come, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's great insights there, and I totally agree with you. What about we haven't talked about this yet or touched on it yet, but what about multinational and multicultural organizations where you have a diverse workforce and geographically dispersed, a lot of different cultures you're dealing with? How does resistance to change manifest itself in those types of organizations?
Obviously, that is more prevalent, and it's not going to go away even for companies that believe they're not multinational, multi-geographical, cross-cultural, and multicultural. But everything that is shifting now, when we're seeing more of the gig economy and more also points of entry from different geographic regions for applying for different jobs that are remote, right, and that allow different point of entry, we have something really important that is always being diminished in my mind. From early on, that cultural attitude and cultural aptitude towards authority and hierarchy and structure or organization, and how that trickles on different global segments. Further away from headquarters we know that we have creating a lot of different subcultures, and understanding that also sometimes that could be positive, but sometimes also can be negative, right? Depending of scenarios. But that creates resistance to change, specifically because if we're not understanding those intricacies, it's going to always be a problem. Specifically, how is authority or hierarchy being also perceived in those specific regions in the world? Second piece that I found fundamentally challenging is communication style. Everybody has their own style, and whatever we perceive that we actually communicated is completely different how it's going to be received, right? And not only just the word of choice of words, the speed, pronunciation, etc., but every culture obviously has their own nomenclature and some specific verbiage that really sits and has a different meaning. Even though we may understand the meaning of the word, might have also completely different connotation and meaning in that particular culture. So it's very important to really understand the complexity related to that.
Mhm.
From aspects of specifically adapting to change in those environments, we have some cultures that are more flexible. I mean, I come from Europe, for example. I was always proactive in so many things, and I really never had the mindset of that I'm seeing that some of my colleagues had or still do. And it's interesting also to look at, what I'm learning from them and their style and their approach and level of ability and willingness to change versus mine. But really helps to also understand that with a diverse workforce, we also have talent that brings different values. And then it's very important to understand how this really translates, right, into that aspects. But I have to say, no matter where we are from, even with 8+ billion people around the world, we have all of us different motivation factors. What may motivate you, Eric, or anybody watching and listening, completing me, motivating me differently? And it's our job from leadership standpoint to really understand the makeup and DNA of team talent that we're running, that we're monitoring, managing, and leading, or whatever might be scenario, and understanding those triggers, understanding their motivational factors. And when we know that, then we can then adjust and look at and tailor that specifically to their needs. But I have to say, also a lot of cultures that I find are very triggered because of we have a very workaholic culture here in the United States. Other cultures have a very different perception of time and planning and time when they're off, when they're on, are they accessible when they're off the clock or whatever might be the case. So it's very important also to really look at those implications and how do we also interact and ask for certain engagements or additional work to be done, etc. And frankly, on the end, I really believe this is something that we don't consider as often, which is truly the risk tolerance. Beside that, you and I might have a completely different motivation factors. You and I may have also completely very different risk tolerance. I might be proactively seeking the risk, while you might be also trying to be more conservative and also trying to weigh things out or look at things from a different perspective. And a lot of that has to do, again, how we approach it, how we communicate it, how we include others, and how do we really allow conversation and discussion around, and then arrive collectively together for path forward.
Mm. Yeah, great insights. I mean, those are good, all really good points. Um, Speaking of more good points, this is from Alcinda, and she has another great question here, which is how important is change management for customers, specifically to ensure we are indeed catering for real needs and they too are given the necessary training to navigate new technologies being implemented. This is not something that I hear happening a lot. So, how do customers fit into this whole change and transformation journey that we're talking about here?
Again, excellent question. And I always say, right now, we're all striving to have a customer excellence. We cannot ever reach customer excellence if we don't have organizational, operational excellence, because that bleeds to customer no matter what, right? As a result, to get at that operational excellence, we need to have a team and individual talent contributors, right? Excellence as well. So when we reach that, which is all about, again, change, being able to adapt to all the shifts that are happening, then we can foster that and clients can see that. It's not just about how we communicate, how frequently, how well we cater, etc. I had a scenario where we had 4 or 5 different changes of team members on team because people being let go or people are being shifted between different projects, or simply constantly different people that are coming on board to take over conversation or clients' care. So it's like, what's going on, and again, clients are very in tuned with a lot of different dynamics. And it's very important also to foster a sense of transparency and be able to also show up in their best interests, right? Because a lot of times when we're seeing when we have, oh, this is a long-term client, we had them for years, we kind of get on autopilot and we don't really pay keen attention, even though we have secure a relationship for next 3, 4, 5 years. How are we showing up nurturing that relationship? How are we also seeking to see what else could possibly be that we can support and add in our day-to-day way of taking care of that particular client, right? And that has really shifted so much and deteriorated in some aspects of some organizations. And as a result, right now consumers are getting smarter. They have so many choices, they have so many opportunities. So we're seeing also clients changing where they're going, where they want to be served, and by whom. And so it's very important also to pay attention to that as well.
Yeah, yeah. So make them part of the journey as well. I mean, we can't forget about the customers because after all, that's why we're doing the work we do in most cases.
Yes.
Uh, Here's an interesting quote from LinkedIn. And the quote is from Jacob Bernowski, who I'm not familiar with, but it's an interesting quote. The quote is, "We have to cure ourselves of the itch for absolute knowledge and power. We have to close the distance between the push button order and the human act. We have to touch people." So I think that last part is
Mm.
interesting. Being able to touch people and connect with people. We can't forget about that in today's AI world where everything is not perfect, but AI is just a whole nother level. It's a whole nother animal of technology that we've never seen before. And so in the midst of all that, we can't forget about that human connection, and we don't want to dehumanize even further than we already have as organizations. And so I think it's a great point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So here's an interesting question. I'm curious to get your knee-jerk reaction to this, Isabel, and this is from uh, Brahamandu, and I apologize for mispronouncing your name, which I likely am. But he says, how far are we at to build AI-powered change management tools? All communications are diversified promptly according to multicultural organizations. People acknowledgements embarked with change waves significantly, and assessments as well. So he's curious to know, is there anything that would that AI could do maybe to enable better change management? Do you see the tools potentially being used to address this human factor that we're talking about?
I love that question. Actually, it is. It can help with carving specific, obviously, outputs as well, expedite communication, additional details, the training, etc., so that really can be tailored to specific departments of organization or overall across the whole organization. So I definitely do see tremendous intersection and opportunity, and I love that side of it where you actually can bring the data and proper analytics, leveraging also the tool and speed of how you can craft and also execute and implement. But in the same time, now with that speed, it shouldn't be issue anymore that we're lacking of information or lacking of communication or keeping other unknown. But we should not be also leaning fully just on that as well, right? So as long as we serve this as and see this as a tool, we're leveraging with also obviously effective tactics to overcome resistance and effective ways to still engage with people and then have the human touch and personalized ways of how we interact. We're going to be able to then generate tremendous success. But can that expedite, make it more effective, better? Absolutely. I'm totally geeking on right now, testing a couple of different AI platforms and or startups that are really exponentially going to be serving organizations in months and years to come. And it's just wonderful to see that. But then again, without inclusive communication, engagement, and participation by humans with humans, no matter what tool we have under sun, will not get us where we really want to.
Mm, mm. How do you think advancing and emerging technologies that continue to exponentially increase in value and just change in general, how do you think that fast pace of technology change that's accelerating, how do you think that's going to affect people's willingness to change, their tolerance for change, their change fatigue. How do you think change management as a discipline gets affected or impacted by these emerging technologies like AI now and in the future as they tend to change faster than humans typically do? What are your thoughts there?
This is really like a catch 22, right? On one hand, we have a great, amazing tool that can do exponentially well, that can also give us outputs and vast information. But ultimately, what we wanted to do is simplify and distill and be able to do a micro, as we're looking and striving for more micro learning on a consistent basis. The same thing we should approach with that. We want to do micro change, right? Change that's going to stick, not just something that we can do in snap and 1 second, but also something that we can call it's being transformational because we committed to it, and we know that is not going to create additional pressure, because obviously with everything else that is speeding up, and that creates tremendous pressure already with huge overload and already fatigued, as you mentioned, workforce. So we have opportunity to really look at things from multiple different perspectives. So for example, how is this affecting in willingness for change? For me, what I'm finding to be really fundamentally different is enhancing willingness to change itself, right? How can you do that? We can focus that we can say we can have a lot of more efficiency. We can make things more simplified for you as a result of, and when it's that perception of that efficiency and puts people at ease, right? So it's also empowerment when people feel like, oh my God, I have a choice and I have this particular set of tools. I have this particular tools that I really feel very comfortable that I had a chance to test drive, and also that I really feel like it's going to enhance what I'm doing on day-to-day basis. This is great, right? So from that perspective, we'll look at some things that what can I automate, for example, what I can also have done quicker, faster, so that I can focus on this area, which cause maybe I don't have enough time, or maybe I feel already overworked, right? So when you have these little trade-offs, when you see that, actually this is going to help me, is going to make a huge difference, right? Then also when you look at things from cultural alignment, as I mentioned around, it's like, how is this going to culturally align with technology? So if you're claiming that we're also fast growing startup or one of the top Fortune 500 companies that is technology enabling a new technology, we have to really first see within ourselves, internal within our organization, before we can really prescribe that or demonstrate or deliver to the client, right? So it's very important to really allow that and say culturally how this fits, and then have a people to culturally align with that. But with increase of change, to answer that second point you, Eric, were asking, obviously these complexities and learning curves can be very challenging for so many, right? So again, as I mentioned earlier, micro learning, it's a great avenue when you really feel like, oh, I just got this concept. Oh my goodness, this is amazing. Then you automatically desire one more, right? Because it feels good. It's like, oh my God, I'm not overwhelmed, or I don't feel like I'm done because I can't keep up with it, or I feel like I'm behind. All of a sudden you start feeling with these incremental 1% daily changes that accumulate to something amazing. And when you take away the fear of losing job from people, right, or lack of trust in technology, those are also elements that I really see great fit for that. So when you know that your job actually will not be eliminated, but it's going to just create more effectiveness and more engagement and more quality, then really start making a huge shift. And obviously, I see some also amazing strategies that we can really encourage to reduce that resistance and increase that adaptation.
That's a perfect segue into my next question, which was going to be how do you, and you've alluded to some of this. I mean, you've talked about micro learning, you've talked about, you just mentioned culture and how culture can be kind of an enabler to getting people to get used to change and accept change and be excited about it. But what are some of the most effective strategies you've seen organizations use to overcome some of this resistance to change that we've talked about?
Obviously, everybody wants to mitigate that resistance and then encourage that adoption. And first comes from that level of transparency from leadership. It's like, okay, how do we do more inclusive planning and implementation, right? Why we have to do it, how is this going to affect existence of organization or impact of everything else related to organization. So when we have more of those dialogues and more of the opportunity to do these planning sessions where everybody's get to be heard or have a chance to ask questions and feel included, the level of inclusion itself strengthens sense of belonging, strengthens sense of desire to really then do more, right? Obviously effective training and support, because a lot of times, how many times, Eric, I mean, from your expertise in ERP implementations at such a large scale across the world, how many people were getting the tool, but they never felt afterwards that they had a support, and in a way that it's being comprehensive, in ways that it's conducive for their learning. And we know how adults learn the best, right? It's not just the theoretical, it's that a practical application. And then also opportunity to really eliminate people's fears associated with the new technologies. And then also be able to really feel that capabilities on mastering these tools, it's possible. And then be able to demonstrate that. It's like, oh, this is easy, let me show you. You know, that interaction that puts people in ease right now, I think it's fundamentally major game changer. But what we're seeing, that personally what I'm seeing that is huge shift, is the transparent communication. If we don't have the level of transparency where we can regularly communicate, either as in short-term impacts, long-term impacts, seeing where we're at, or have some visual to see the progress. You know, like a car, when you go and drive a car with a full tank of gas, it's like, okay, we started on empty, we're slowly increasing, we're now filling up, you know. Or when you also start with the speed, we're on the zero, and now we're going to drive this amazing Ferrari 350 miles, fantastic. But to get there, we have to start with that turning on the engine, with that first zero, right? That shows, and then slowly, incrementally increase that. And when you have that foundation, then you can accelerate. And just because one department, or one group, or one individual is going faster, you know, that's also a great way to really get infectious desire for others. And we do not get this part very well, which is of the political, with a sense of that feedback loop, right? It's like, how do we provide the feedback in terms of where we're at right now in that gauge, how far and how quickly that speed is going to get us. Is it just about speed itself, but it's also where direction, where we're going. And when you align those two things, magic happens, right?
Right. Yeah. And suddenly driving that Ferrari becomes fun again, because we've learned how to master it. We feel comfortable with the Ferrari, and it can be fun. It's interesting. This is a really interesting point. Let me pull it up here. I just lost it in the stream. This is from William on YouTube. And I love this comment.
Yes.
William says, you'll also run into situations where a key person feels the company is dependent on their occasional heroics or have other personal incentives. Training and other SNOP won't be sufficient here. So, he brings up a really good point in that, if, let's just say hypothetically, I don't have very good systems at the company I work for, but I've created this great spreadsheet that, I've done all these macros and cool connections that can sort of help me do my job better. And I've done that despite the fact that I don't have good tools at my disposal. It's my heroics, it's my tribal knowledge, it's the value I bring to the organization, is sort of overcoming these obstacles. And now if you automate a lot of that and you take that away, you're not doing it to hurt me, but it is kind of hurting me unintentionally. It's making me feel threatened, because now my heroics don't matter as much, because now
Mm. That's an excellent
make it easier,
question.
make it easier for everyone else.
Excellent comment, excellent question. So what happens? What really smart, lean agile, effective companies are doing in these situations. They're also looking, because it's cross-pollination, right? Maybe your existing role might also shift. What you typically used to do, now certain things, because they're being automated, that doesn't mean now you're going to be doing less, or simply you're not going to be needed more. Matter of fact, actually, due to AI acceleration, we're calling for different roles, and we're looking from organizational design, looking from job descriptions, looking from just simply intersection. It's so much opportunity to create not only hybrid roles, but also create additional tasks and specifics where you can cross-pollinate not only with your department, but other groups and divisions within organization, which I think, if it's done right, can actually tear down the silos and fragmentation and make everybody truly hero, specifically with early adoption. If you're early adopter, that is recognizing this, where you can also serve and support, and how you can be the bridge between either different departments or the specific different offerings that are in the making. So I would encourage you to say where I can shine now, given that this is being taken away or it's being done in this way. That doesn't, don't look at it being taken away. Look at it as a new way of doing the business. Oh, okay, now it's being done this way. How can I think 2, 3, 5, 10 steps ahead? And how can I insert myself, or how can I propose additional things that I can do now so that I can be of more value? Because ultimately, as we're driving to make value for our customers, for our clients, we should also look at how can we be valuable internal stakeholders, and that's a perfect example.
Yeah, that's a great example. What about this is from Megan on LinkedIn. Megan asked the question: how would you go about this idea of culture and change management and navigate it in an effective way? So, culture is something that obviously we're not going to change overnight. Culture is definitely not going to change as fast as technology is changing. But what are some tips or strategies or tactics you've seen work to help create that sort of culture that you've been alluding to and describing throughout the conversation here?
I love the question. So for organizations that are recognizing, because just the magnitude of self of this change, right? Economy, design of organization, or just overall number of people, we're going through seeing some unprecedented shrinking of different departments, or just simply where people are feeling like, now I have to, like a deja vu again, take more, bigger, heavier load. That's why we're seeing so much how effective we are, right? And then how highly performing we are. Do we perform well? And why we don't perform well. So with so many other symptomatic issues being on the table, which is perfect storm, in my opinion, for right type of mindset from leadership standpoint to really look at what just happened? How do we execute on this? Where are we at? Is it short term or long term? And how is this really already reshaped not only our mission statement, vision, goals, and objective, but culturally what we praise ourselves about, how far away we are from where we're supposed to be. One quickest way we can really see that, and I'm saying this with humility, is by going to Glassdoor and going to Indeed and look at how much somebody endorsed for that particular organization, not only from CEO level, from different departments. People are more than ever sharing exactly how do they feel. And it's interesting, it used to be when people transition, they will leave reviews after they left the job. Doesn't matter which circumstantial avenues are resulting that. Now we're seeing something really interesting in terms of trend when people are sharing while they're still there, because that's kind of also their cry is like, nobody's listening. This is what I'm going to at least make public. So at least hopefully somebody will gain some traction here so that people can at least know. So why I'm sharing this is because then really quickly you can see snippet. Where is this organization? And are they really willing to make that transformation and willing to go through that commitment? And if that commitment doesn't exist from tops, doesn't matter how much committed we are as individual contributors, we're not going to be able to make a dent in that area. So I maybe not answer you're looking for, but what I want to say is really, again, boils down to it. Who is the lead in the ship or department or team, and how flexible they are, and then how can we co-lead together, and how can we also emphasize on those cultural values. And if that doesn't work, then maybe we have opportunity to revisit. Maybe it's time to shift or go maybe different department, or maybe work with a different group, or maybe all together also look at where we can create that synergy elsewhere. Because unfortunately, we don't have time now. It's not any more choice, right? As it's no more choice how technology speeds up, it's not any more choice for organizations to ignore those symptomatic issues, because they're costly. They're costing a lot of money.
Mm,
And now, if nothing else, the cost will be one of the triggers. Hopefully, for not too long. Again, as I mentioned earlier, when the pain is so high, then we are finally paying attention and then becoming more willing to adjust. But from positive perspective, I really hope and seeing some really amazing proactive organizations that are bringing teams together so beautifully, and as a result they are able to actually easily navigate. So change management, it's not even part of the vocabulary. It's how we're doing our organizational transformation, how we're quickly making this happen, and being result driven as a
right.
cohesive team versus as a fragment silo departments.
Yeah. Yeah. Great stuff. I mean, now just to bring it all full circle and to sort of put a capstone on everything we've talked about here today, what are some of the ways that you recommend that an organization gets started on their change journeys? If they're just starting a digital transformation or a business transformation, what are some of the first steps that can help us get to this grander vision of that future state that we're talking about?
I really want leaders to humbly look at for opportunities to pause and to truly arm themselves with smart, capable people that they can really understand cause and effects, and also the root issues, so they have really clear assessment what they have, what their DNA of their organization currently is, of their leadership, as well as what the appetite for change is, how well equipped they are for the change and transformation, and also where the gaps are, what they're truly missing. So, what are those key ingredients that they have to have in order to make this amazing output, right? And then obviously from those very honest, transparent, transformative assessments and analysis and understanding where we're coming from and where we truly want to go, then to understand what truly needs to happen. We hear this, oh, this is the blueprint for this, or this is a avenues, what you need to do. But if you don't know what your current state is, and if you don't have a aligned understanding and honest, transparent gleaning in truly where you're at, it's going to be really hard, because you're setting up your teams and everybody else to fail, because you're missing so much in order to get where you want to get, right? So not only in terms of talent, in
Mm,
terms of skill, also in terms of processes, and frankly, in terms of the right type of technology.
yeah, that's well said, and that's great tactical or great practical advice for organizations that are getting started on their journey. So I want to thank you for being here, Isabel. This was a great conversation. I really enjoyed your insights here, and it's great having you here. And I love the audience questions too. So thank you for everyone for being part of this conversation here today. What are the best ways for people to reach you and learn more about you and your company, Isabella?
It will be very great if you guys connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments as well, or any other social platform. But LinkedIn is the one where I really spend the most time and effort. So, and then also through my website, isabelalundberg.com.
Perfect. Well, great. Well, thank you for being here, Isabella. Really appreciate it. It's great having you. You're a great guest, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely, and pleasure. Also, thank you for having me, and pleasure to have a just great interaction with your audience and all the wonderful questions that all of you ask. So, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you to the audience, and thank you for being part of this live podcast you all were part of. This podcast will be premiere in about 3 weeks on Transformation Ground Control podcast, which you can keep an eye out for new episodes. You can watch all the past episodes of that podcast and show, which is at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And what we do is we edit this interview, we add some more content to it, and we polish it up and make it into a formal podcast episode. So thank you for being part of how the sausage is made here by being here live today. So thank you everyone for being here. Have a great week. We hope to see you next time. We do these live interviews every week, same time, same place, every Tuesday. So we hope to see you next week as well. In the meantime, have a great week, and we will see you all soon.